You're a great guest to be here.
Today, and so at this point,
this is what we're in now. This is America in 2024.
Here's what I will say.
Forget the racism.
That's right.
Which I should
That's
die.
Right.
I didn't say that you should die.
What does beeper mean? Don't give me a
I did not say you should die.
Why did you say my beeper goes?
What did you mean?
What did you mean by the beeper?
So
What did you mean by the beeper? No, you didn't. You said, I hope your beeper doesn't go off.
Ryan, stop talking.
At least have the guts to support your racist brother.
I'm so sorry. This is why yesterday's rally was disgusting.
Don't call us Nazis, but I'm going to threaten the brown guy as a terrorist and kill him.
Because I didn't ever say Donald Trump was Hitler. But do you know who stood on a stage yesterday and said, I want to come to the Nazi rally? I don't have to make up words and call you something. You're saying it for yourself. And what you just said right here, apologize, but I will tell you, I don't accept that apology, and you didn't even say it to me. That was disgusting. But I can be offended when you don't even say it to me. I'm not Puerto Rican, but I was offended by what he said yesterday. And I'm offended that the former president and potentially future president would allow it and go for 12 hours and not say, I don't care, because you know what? When Kamala Harris put out statements about switching of opinions, it wasn't good enough for Republicans.
Why are you looking at me?
Because you said it.
Why don't you take this back a little?
I have a question for you. Black women, why is it that you can never stay out of everyone else's business and stop being Captain Save-A-Ho? For so long, black women almost instinctively play the masculine role, whether it's being the pillar of the community to literally jumping into fights or arguments that don't concern you at all. There have been so many times that black women have legit put their lives and safety on the line to save others. As you can see, I said others. If you notice, black women will literally put on a cape and play Superwoman on behalf of anyone else except for a fellow black woman. And let's not act like colorism doesn't play a part in this. If you notice, it's usually always a dark-skinned black woman who's playing Superwoman. You never really see light-skinned women or mixed race or non-black women doing such masculine things. On top of that, if we're not collectively mewling on everyone's behalf, we're unnecessarily slurring ourselves out. The question is, why don't we seem to have balance when it comes to our image? It seems the black woman's image has become more and more overtly over-sexualized and seems to be getting worse. Where is this coming from? And why are we collectively embracing the worst images of ourselves? Well, today we are going to explore some historical reasons why black women seem to personify such negative traits that go against our image as well as our esteem. This image is an image that many black women personify so readily. Dark-skinned, overweight, aggressive, political community backbone. But why is that? Is it inherent? Is it learned behavior? Above all, is it appreciated? Let's explore this first major flawed trait that has been detrimental to the black woman, and that is the literal role of a mammy. For centuries, black women, particularly those with darker skin, have played an unseen yet pivotal role in championing social causes, supporting others even at great personal cost. Often seen as the backbone of their communities, these women have extended their strength beyond the boundaries of their own experiences, advocating for justice, equality, and compassion for all. But this loyalty has frequently gone unreciprocated, leaving them with a complex legacy of self-sacrifice and, at times, misrepresentation. From the Mammy of Southern plantations to the militant freedom fighters of the Black Panther Party, black women have always carried the weight of their communities. But behind the fierce loyalty, resilience, and tireless advocacy lies a story of internal conflict, painful stereotypes, and often unacknowledged sacrifices. This documentary explores the historical and modern challenges black women face as they navigate roles of loyalty, strength, and compassion, while questioning at what cost they are forced to bear these expectations. The mammy stereotype emerged in the antebellum South, depicting black women as nurturing, obedient, and wholly devoted to white families, particularly as caretakers for white children. This idealized image of the faithful, asexual, and self-sacrificing black woman served to justify the exploitation of black women as both enslaved and domestic laborers. Though supposedly loved and trusted, this trope relegated black women to subservient roles, erasing their individuality and humanity. Black women have historically been expected to extend their loyalty, compassion, and resilience to support not only their own community, but often other groups outside of it. Throughout American history, black women have been at the forefront of movements advocating for a wide range of causes. from racial equality to women's liberation and LGBTQ+ rights. However, their loyalty often comes with a cost, as their contributions are frequently underappreciated and even unreciprocated. One striking example of this complex loyalty can be seen in the story of Keisha Thomas. In 1996, Thomas, an 18-year-old black girl, was photographed shielding a white man from a crowd during a Klan rally in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The man, who bore a Nazi tattoo, had somehow found himself on the receiving end of anger from the surrounding crowd. Driven by her own moral compass, Keisha instinctively literally threw herself between the man and the protesters, shielding him from harm despite his evident racism and ideology that dehumanized people like her. Her act of compassion and empathy towards someone who likely would not have done the same for her left a powerful, complicated legacy. While her action drew admiration from some, it showed the often one-sided nature of black women's advocacy and forgiveness. Keisha Thomas still believes what she did almost 30 years ago was the right thing to do, and has no regrets about doing it. Another deeply troubling example of loyalty without reciprocity is found in the high-profile case of Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez. In 2020, rapper Meg Thee Stallion alleged that fellow artist Tory Lanez had shot her in the foot following a heated argument. The incident led to widespread media coverage, but what followed highlighted a troubling trend in the response to black women speaking out about harm done to them, especially when defending themselves against accusations. Initially, Megan's claims were met with skepticism from the public, and some prominent voices within the black community even sided with Lanez, questioning her credibility. The backlash she faced on social media was swift, with many accusing her of lying, exaggerating, or trying to harm Lanez's career. Some black women also hesitated to support her fully, with a few even expressing doubts about her account, revealing an underlying expectation for black women to protect black men, even at their own expense. This case sparked debates about how black women are often pressured to protect others, even when they are the victims themselves. Megan eventually released a statement saying, "I was shot and I tried to spare Lanez because of the cultural expectation to protect black men from further legal or societal harm." Her statement resonated with many black women who recognized the familiar pattern of feeling obligated to support black men, even at the risk of personal harm or emotional trauma. The aftermath of this incident revealed a long-standing issue. Black women often feel compelled to extend loyalty, empathy, and protection to black men, sometimes without receiving the same solidarity in return. Megan's case ignited a conversation on social media about how black women are frequently placed in a position where they have to choose between advocating for themselves and protecting the very people who may have harmed them. I ask, why? Some may even say that church and religion plays a part in the one-sided devotion for others that the black woman often displays. Because the Bible teaches to turn the other cheek, or if your enemy slaps you on the cheek, turn and give him the other. Judge not, lest thee be judged. Only God can judge. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. Forgive, etc., etc. These are all sayings that you'll often hear black people, but mainly black women, saying in the community, and since the black church mainly consists of mostly women, that ideology seems deeply embedded in her psyche. The black church has played a significant role in both empowering and shaping the roles of black women in the community, including the reinforcement of the Mammy trope, where black women are expected to be self-sacrificing, nurturing, and morally upstanding caretakers. Historically, the church was a central institution in black communities, providing not only spiritual guidance, but also social structure, education, and activism. However, it has also perpetuated certain expectations for black women that align with the nurturing maternal qualities associated with the Mammy figure. In many black churches, black women have been both the backbone of church activities and the primary labor force. They organize, volunteer, and lead ministries, often in unpaid or undervalued roles. The expectation to be self-sacrificing in service to others has been subtly encouraged through teachings that emphasize humility, patience, and service to family and community. These qualities, while noble, can reinforce the idea that Black women should prioritize others over themselves, embodying a caregiver role that leaves little room for self-care or self-expression outside of nurturing others. The church's emphasis on traditional gender roles, based on interpretations of Scripture, can also contribute to the Mammy expectation. Teachings on modesty, purity, and submission have historically placed Black women in roles of dutiful service, often within the confines of marriage, family, or community service. This dynamic aligns with the image of the strong Black woman who is expected to endure hardship and support others without complaint. In particular, sermons and teachings that emphasize the role of women as mothers of the church or spiritual mothers to the congregation further reinforce this image. Moreover, the church's structure often upholds male leadership while women are encouraged to work in supportive roles. While Black women make up the majority of many congregations and do much of the organizing work, leadership roles are frequently reserved for men. This power dynamic can reinforce societal messages that women's primary value lies in nurturing and serving others rather than pursuing leadership or independence, i.e. mammying. It's deeply embedded. Examples like these of Keisha Thomas and how church plays a part reveal the expectations placed on Black women to forgive, support, and stand up for others, even those who may not respect or reciprocate that compassion. From defending those with hateful ideologies to supporting movements that don't fully support them in return, Black women frequently embody a level of empathy that is seldom matched. Speaking of supporting movements that don't reciprocate, nothing shows this more than the women of the Black Panther Party. In the 1960s and 1970s, the Black Panther Party emerged as one of the most influential Black liberation movements in America, advocating for racial justice, community empowerment, and protection against police brutality. Although Black women played vital roles within the BPP, organizing community initiatives, holding leadership positions, and risking their lives for the movement, they often faced significant mistreatment and exploitation from male party members. This internal gender struggle underscored a troubling paradox. While fighting for liberation from white oppression, Black men in the party sometimes perpetuated misogynistic and abusive behaviors against their Black female counterparts. Black women who joined the Black Panther Party were essential to its operations. Figures like Kathleen Cleaver, Elaine Brown, and Assata Shakur became prominent in the movement, using their voices to advocate for both racial and gender equality. However, despite their dedication and leadership, many Black women within the party faced discrimination and were often relegated to subordinate roles. They were frequently expected to handle clerical tasks, cook meals, and organize community programs while men occupied more visible leadership roles, receiving the credit and public attention. More disturbingly, several female members reported experiencing sexual harassment and even assault from their male comrades. Some men in the party exploited their positions of power, coercing or pressuring female members into sexual relationships under the guise of solidarity or revolutionary duty. This created a hostile environment where Black women were objectified, leaving them feeling betrayed by a movement that was supposed to protect and respect them. Many were discouraged from speaking out, as criticizing male leaders could result in retaliation or accusations of undermining the cause. Adding to this mistreatment was a deeply rooted hypocrisy regarding interracial relationships within the Panthers. While Black women were expected to remain loyal to Black men, some male members openly pursued sexual relationships with white women. In particular, some narratives point out that while the Panthers called for racial equality, certain male members would also criticize the Black women for asserting their authority or exercising independence, her looks, and sometimes even directing harsh language and discriminatory behavior toward them. Meanwhile, these same men reportedly displayed a contrasting desire for relationships with white women, sometimes going so far as to have the Black women members wait outside the bedroom door while they had sex with these white women, thus showing a painful hypocrisy within the party. This often left the black women feeling devalued as they were told to adhere to certain standards that were disregarded by their male counterparts. Black women members were frequently degraded for their appearance or dismissed as overly emotional or inferior. This double standard created a painful dynamic where black women felt their loyalty and worth were constantly questioned, even as they sacrificed for the movement. For example, Elaine Brown, who became the only woman to lead the Black Panther Party, openly spoke about the misogyny she faced and the expectation that women should be submissive. Brown described how, despite her leadership role, she was subjected to sexist remarks and was constantly undermined by men who believed women could never be true revolutionaries. In her memoir, A Taste of Power, she revealed that even her position as a leader did not protect her from the pervasive misogyny and disrespect within the party. The experiences of black women in the Black Panther Party highlight a difficult reality. Even within spaces designed to empower black people, black women's voices were often silenced and her image disrespected. So what happens when one is constantly feeling disrespected or disregarded? Sometimes you lash out and get loud, hence the second trope, the angry black woman. As society evolved, so too did the stereotypes about black women. Enter the angry black woman trope, an image that emerged alongside the civil rights movement. This stereotype painted black women as aggressive, loud, and difficult to deal with, a stark contrast to the self-sacrificing Mammy. Rooted in societal fears and resentment toward assertive black women who spoke out, this caricature suggested that black women were combative and unreasonable by nature. The angry black woman trope originated from deeply rooted stereotypes dating back to slavery and colonialism. This stereotype, which portrays black women as irrationally angry, combative, and difficult, evolved as a way to delegitimize and control black women's expressions of pain, frustration, or empowerment. Here's a closer look at how it developed over time. First, post-slavery characterization. After the abolition of slavery, the image of black women as strong, combative figures emerged as part of efforts to paint them as invulnerable and lacking in femininity or emotional nuance. This was partly a reaction to the real resilience and endurance that black women showed in fighting for civil rights and survival. However, by framing them as angry or overly assertive, this resilience was used against them to prevent their voices from being taken seriously in both public and private spheres. Second, media reinforcement. In the early 20th century, film, television, and literature often depicted black women in limited and exaggerated roles, including the Sapphire character. Sapphire, a character from the radio and later TV show Amos and Andy, embodied this trope. She was loud, hostile, and emasculating. This portrayal contributed significantly to the image of black women as quick-tempered and combative, reinforcing a stereotype that has persisted in media ever since. 3. Political movements and pushback. Throughout the civil rights and feminist movements, black women were often vocal about issues of racism, sexism, and inequality, which led to their being labeled as angry or difficult by opponents who wished to discredit their activism. This label was especially detrimental because it discouraged black women from expressing their legitimate frustrations and advocating for change without fear of being stereotyped. In modern media, this trope became exemplified through various television characters. One such example is, in Martin, the character contrast between Pam James, played by Tichina Arnold, and Gina Waters, played by Tisha Campbell, is noticeable not only in personality, but also through the dynamics of colorism and gender stereotypes. Pam is often portrayed as outspoken, confident, and confrontational, with a sense of humor that leans into sharp wit and sarcasm, particularly in her interactions with Martin. Her darker skin tone, bold demeanor, and independent nature align with the angry black woman trope, a stereotype that characterizes black women as loud, aggressive, or overly assertive. In contrast, Gina, portrayed as sweet, patient, and more reserved, embodies a different archetype often afforded to lighter-skinned women in media. Gina's demure personality makes her the ideal partner in the eyes of Martin, while Pam's assertiveness and dark skin are often the target of Martin's jokes. The differences between them subtly reflect colorism, where Gina's light skin and feminine qualities are prized, while Pam's darker skin and bolder personality are treated as antagonistic and comedic. This dynamic reflects broader societal biases that assign stereotypes based on skin tone, with darker-skinned women often depicted as tougher or more combative, and lighter-skinned women shown as soft or ideal. Despite the comedic intent, these portrayals reinforce stereotypes that can limit the perceptions of Black women in real life, suggesting that lighter-skinned women are more desirable and approachable, while darker-skinned women are sidelined or framed as secondary figures, often without romantic appeal. Reality television in the 2000s and 2010s further cemented this stereotype. Shows like The Real Housewives of Atlanta and Love and Hip Hop portrayed Black women as hyper-aggressive, confrontational, and prone to physical altercations. While these behaviors created captivating television, they also reinforced the idea that Black women, especially darker-skinned women, are naturally prone to aggression and conflict. Fourth, psychological and social control. Although many Black women do reinforce the angry Black woman stereotype, it has been used to silence Black women and delegitimize their responses to injustice, positioning them as irrational or overly emotional. The stereotype serves as a way to discourage Black women from speaking out, as their words or emotions are often dismissed under this label, regardless of context. This section explores whether these behaviors are inherent, learned, or simply coping mechanisms that Black women have developed to survive in a society that has often treated them as less than. Social scientists have noted that stereotypes rarely emerge from pure imagination. Rather, they evolve from society's expectations, fears, and projections onto marginalized groups. Some argue that the loud or aggressive traits are learned behaviors, born out of the need for Black women to assert themselves in an often hostile environment. Because of their marginalized status, Black women are frequently forced to advocate more fiercely for their rights, a behavior that may be mistaken or labeled as aggression by a society unfamiliar with the pressures Black women face. Psychologists also point to the impact of media representation on self-perception. Studies show that negative portrayals can influence how individuals see themselves, potentially causing internalized stereotypes to shape behavior. This self-fulfilling prophecy effect has caused some Black women to internalize these roles, seeing assertiveness as a required means of survival. And if using assertiveness is a means of survival, then the Black woman seems to be using sexuality as desperation for desirability. The Jezebel stereotype, another harmful legacy rooted in slavery, portrays Black women as hypersexual, seductive, and morally corrupt. This image was used to justify the exploitation and sexual abuse of enslaved Black women, suggesting they were promiscuous by nature and therefore unrapeable. White slave owners rationalized their actions by framing Black women as inherently immoral, reinforcing a deeply damaging stereotype that still affects Black women today. Origins of the Jezebel stereotype. When European colonizers encountered African societies, they often misinterpreted and exaggerated elements of African cultural norms, especially around clothing and sexuality. In warm climates, some African societies dressed minimally, which Europeans perceived as indecent and sexual. This misunderstanding laid the groundwork for a belief that African women were more sexual and uncivilized, an idea they used to justify enslaving African people, particularly women. Once in the Americas, this stereotype evolved as an economic and social tool. Slave owners often forced black women to bear children to increase the number of enslaved individuals, thus enhancing their labor force. By framing black women as naturally promiscuous, slaveholders could rationalize and hide the frequent sexual exploitation, abuse, and rape that enslaved women endured. If black women were seen as inherently sexual and unrapeable, it allowed white men to avoid responsibility for their actions and minimize the potential backlash against the institution of slavery. Examples of the Jezebel stereotype in history: economic incentive and forced breeding. Many plantations systematically encouraged reproduction among enslaved people, sometimes through forced sexual relations. Enslaved women were expected to bear children as soon as they reached puberty to supply the plantation with new laborers. By perpetuating the Jezebel stereotype, slave owners justified this breeding as something black women wanted rather than an exploitation of their bodies for economic gain. Enslaved women as concubines. In the antebellum South, it was not uncommon for white men to keep enslaved black women as forced mistresses or concubines. This practice was often public knowledge, though rarely condemned, because society accepted the myth that black women were sexually available. The most well-known example is Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman owned by Thomas Jefferson. Hemings was reportedly forced into a sexual relationship with Jefferson, resulting in several children. Hemings's story reflects the lack of agency black women had over their own bodies and how this stereotype obscured and normalized sexual violence. 3. The role of religion and morality. The use of biblical stories and moral teachings also reinforced the Jezebel stereotype. Slaveholders compared black women to the biblical figure Jezebel, a queen often portrayed as morally corrupt and sexually manipulative. By associating enslaved black women with this negative figure, they justified harsh treatment and moral policing, framing them as temptresses who purposely led men astray. 4th. Sarah Baartman. Sarah Baartman, a Khoikhoi woman from South Africa, was famously exploited and displayed in Europe during the early 19th century as the Hottentot Venus. Her body was exoticized, sexualized, and put on display, reducing her to an object of curiosity and lust. Baartman's story epitomizes how black women's bodies were dehumanized and fetishized, as well as the trauma caused by the Jezebel stereotype. Even after her death, her body was dissected and displayed, showing the extent of this objectification. 5. Media reinforcement in the Jim Crow era. After slavery, the Jezebel stereotype persisted through minstrel shows, literature, and films that depicted black women as seductive, immoral, or fallen women. This was often contrasted with the pure, virtuous image of a white womanhood. Films like Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind indirectly reinforced this stereotype by casting black women in roles that implied moral depravity or limited self-worth. Even in more progressive times, black women in film and media were frequently typecast as vixens or hypersexualized figures, reflecting lingering traces of the Jezebel image. This historical use of the Jezebel stereotype has left enduring scars, affecting how black women are viewed, treated, and sometimes even see themselves. The stereotype has had significant social, psychological, and economic impacts, influencing everything from professional opportunities to personal relationships. By understanding its origins, we can begin to dismantle this harmful image and appreciate the resilience of black women who have long been forced to contend with these unjust labels. But that's also hard to do when so many of our black women are still continually perpetuating this harmful stereotype. In the media, this trope has manifested in images of black women as over-sexualized or available for the desires of others, shaping society's view of black women as objects rather than individuals. The lasting impact of the Jezebel stereotype is particularly damaging to self-esteem, as black women internalize messages about their perceived value being tied to sexuality or appearance rather than their intrinsic worth. In modern media, the Jezebel trope continues to appear in portrayals of Black women as overly provocative or seductive. For instance, in hip-hop and music videos, Black female bodies are often displayed and sexualized to a degree that overshadows other aspects of their identity, reinforcing the idea that Black women exist primarily as objects of desire. Artists like Nicki Minaj, Megan Thee Stallion, and Sexy Red, to name a few, while celebrated for their confidence and talent, face scrutiny due to the hypersexualized ways in which they are represented or choose to represent themselves. This scrutiny often carries a double standard, as Black female artists are judged more harshly than their non-Black counterparts for embracing sexuality. But why is it that Black women seem so willingly to embrace this Jezebel image? Here are a few reasons. Historical devaluation of Black womanhood. The history of viewing Black women as less worthy or respectable has impacted how they see themselves. Constant exposure to stereotypes that emphasize hypersexuality while denying their full humanity can lead to internalized beliefs that their value lies primarily in their sexuality. Some Black women may embrace the Jezebel stereotype as a way to reclaim agency over their bodies, though this response is often rooted in a need to feel valued in a society that hasn't affirmed them. Media influence and lack of representation. Modern media often reinforces the Jezebel trope through music, television, and social media by consistently portraying Black women as sexual objects. When representations of Black women are limited to hypersexual roles, it can reinforce a narrow and damaging perception of femininity for Black women, which can affect self-worth and identity. With few diverse portrayals available, some may turn to the Jezebel archetype as a way of fitting into the representations that they see. Rebellion against respectability politics. The Jezebel trope can also be a response to the restrictive standards of respectability politics, where Black women are told to suppress expressions of sexuality to avoid negative stereotypes. Embracing the Jezebel archetype can be seen as rejecting these limiting standards. Though this response is complex and often misunderstood, it's rooted in a desire for agency and expression, but can be tied to deeper feelings of inadequacy or internalized stereotypes. And what seems to be the most evident is the desperation for desirability. Black women are constantly being told how unattractive she is, how ugly her features are, how her skin tone is flawed, her attitude is poor, how unfeminine she is, etc. Well, anyone who constantly hears horrible things said about them or experiences mistreatment seemingly from everyone, including their own community, it can cause desperation for some kind of validation, even if it's detrimental. For so long, at least until more recent years, the Black woman has always been complimented for her body, especially her big booty. Songs with degrading lyrics like, "It must be your ass 'cause it ain't your face," from Tip Drill show that society only cares about the Black woman's desirable body. So in order to get some kind of validation, she lends her image and body out sexually. She may feel that's all she can offer. This is why we have to see newer, better images of ourselves to raise healthy collective esteem, or else our image as Black women are only going to get worse. Now we've discussed how the Black woman oftentimes will mule herself out on behalf of others. But have you ever noticed that the Black woman doesn't expand that same grace upon another Black woman? Why is that? Let's see what could be some possible reasons. The complex issue of Black women not always defending or valuing one another has roots in historical, social, and cultural factors that have been shaped by centuries of oppression, internalized stereotypes, and systemic racism. Here are some factors that contribute to this phenomenon. First, historical divisions and survival pressures. During slavery, enslaved Black people were often divided based on color, labor roles, or status, which created hierarchies that fractured unity. Women in particular faced harsh, dehumanizing treatment that sometimes required self-preservation over solidarity. These historical divisions have lasting impacts, as survival pressures often condition Black women to focus on individual resilience, sometimes at the expense of community connections. 2. Internalized stereotypes. Stereotypes like the strong Black woman and angry Black woman have pressured Black women to maintain strength and independence, sometimes discouraging them from seeking or offering support. Additionally, stereotypes that depict Black women as competitors can foster distrust, making solidarity seem difficult. Internalized biases shaped by these stereotypes may lead some Black women to judge others harshly or to downplay the importance of supporting one another. 3. Colorism and socioeconomic divides. Colorism, which favors lighter skin within and outside the Black community, has contributed to divisions among Black women. Lighter-skinned women have historically been granted more social privileges, leading to tensions based on perceived access to opportunities. Furthermore, economic pressures often add to these divides, as women with different socioeconomic backgrounds may experience varied social expectations and barriers which can sometimes erode solidarity. 4. Influence of media narratives. Media has historically pitted Black women against one another by casting them in roles that emphasize competition, particularly in reality television and other entertainment. This portrayal can reinforce the perception that Black women are more likely to be combative with each other than supportive. When women grow up seeing these dynamics in the media, they may internalize them and struggle to build genuine connections with each other. 5. Trauma and mistrust. From broader society, generational trauma, a result of repeated marginalization, has sometimes created an atmosphere of mistrust and guardedness among Black women. This lack of trust can make forming genuine bonds challenging. Furthermore, Black women are often required to navigate complex social structures that demand they align with or appease other groups, sometimes at the expense of defending or standing up for each other. So let's come to a conclusion as to why Black women as a whole tend to latch on to all these detrimental traits that affect us negatively. Black women are hypersexual because of constantly being told how unattractive, undesirable she is, how ugly her features are, how disgusting her skin tone is, how no one truly wants her other than inside the bed. So, she offers her sex or sex appeal to feel desired even at the expense of her self-respect. She basically says, if you tell me that all I'm good for is my booty, then I'm going to make sure that that's all you'll ever see. If all I'm good for is what my mouth can do or how well I can arch, then that's all I'll ever lead with. Just as long as you want me in some kind of way. I'm down. Black women are loud and aggressive because for so long she didn't have a voice. No one has ever defended her or protected her, so she's always had to defend and protect herself. Whether it was from systematic harm from the dominant society or the abuse and harm caused from those in her own community, she basically says, how else can I be heard if I don't raise my voice? How else can I be safe if I don't fight? I'm going to get you before you get me. And even with that, she still finds a way to have a caring heart, even to her own detriment. Black women mule for others because she knows how it feels to be treated poorly, and her natural caring nature wants to help others not to feel torn down the way she's been torn. She basically says, I wouldn't wish this feeling on my worst enemy, so let me elevate you so that you don't feel so down like me. Black women don't defend fellow Black women because she hates herself. She doesn't see herself as valuable, desirable, worth it, so she basically says, why should I care about the next Black woman? She's no better than me. I'm no better than her. We both ain't shit, so I'm gonna keep her down with me. After all, as the saying goes, misery loves company. My fellow Black women, now that we see the traits that are harmful to us and that have impacted us so deeply, the question is, can we fix this? The other question is, do we want to? Collectively, we have to come together and understand that muling on everyone else's behalf only harms us. No matter what they say, we are worth it, and you better believe it. So, lurkers, what do you think? Why do you personally feel that Black women are so quick to protect and nurture others at her own expense? Do you resonate with any of the following traits we've discussed? Are you working on yourself? How's your relationship with fellow Black women? Let me know down below.